You think you are smart. Most people in this position do. But smart is not a trait. It is a story you started telling yourself early enough that you stopped questioning the source. Someone praised you. A test came back with a good number. You understood something faster than the people around you. And somewhere in that sequence, a belief got installed. I am not the kind of person who fails at things like this. And yet, the position you want is held by someone else. The pattern you identified in yourself 3 years ago is still running. The version of your life you have been working toward keeps not arriving. Not because you are not smart. Because smart people are specifically, structurally, neurologically better at staying stuck than everyone else. They are better at explaining why the situation is more complicated than it looks. Better at finding reasons the timing is not quite right. Better at producing a version of events where the problem is always just outside their control. Very convincing. Very thorough. Completely useless. This video is about the 3 behavioral programs running underneath all of that intelligence, and why the smarter you are, the harder they are to see.
That's how beautiful you are. Come una giornata soleggiata.
The dominant model most people run looks like this. Identify the bad pattern, understand where it comes from, make a different choice. It is a clean model. It is also missing the architecture of how the brain actually stores and executes behavior. When you recognize a pattern in yourself, when you say, "I know why I do this," you are engaging your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles conscious deliberation, goal setting, language. What you are not engaging is the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia does not care what you know. It does not receive memos from the prefrontal cortex about your new intentions. It runs pre-compiled behavioral programs, action chunks encoded through repetition, and it runs them faster than conscious thought can intercept them. Awareness lives upstairs. The scripts run downstairs. And most interventions, most books, most coaching, most identify your pattern frameworks operate entirely on the upstairs floor, wondering why nothing changes below. That gap is not a willpower problem. It is an architectural one. Roger Schenck and Robert Abelson at Yale, 1977. They were trying to solve a problem in artificial intelligence. How does a machine understand a story when half the information is never stated? What they found instead was a map of how the human brain organizes behavior. They called them cognitive scripts, not habits, scripts. The distinction matters. A habit is a single stimulus response loop. See the coffee machine, pour the coffee. Narrow, context-bound, one move. A script is an entire program, a hierarchical network of scenes, roles, expectations, and causal chains, coordinating dozens of behaviors across time toward a single internalized goal. The script does not just tell you what to do, it tells you what the situation means, who you are in it, and what comes next. Bauer, Black, and Turner validated this in 1979. When participants read stories with missing steps, they automatically filled in the gaps, not randomly, but with script-consistent events they had never read. The brain does not notice the missing information. It reconstructs it to match the program already running. Think about the last time you stayed in a situation you knew was wrong, a job, a relationship, a direction, longer than the evidence warranted. You were not ignoring the evidence. You were reconstructing it to fit the script. Anne Graybiel's laboratory at MIT mapped what happens neurologically when a script locks in. Recording striatal activity in subjects as behaviors became automatic, her team found that neural firing shifted from the caudate nucleus, the goal-directed deliberate system, to the putamen and the dorsolateral striatum. The signature of full automation? Neurons fire only at the start and end of a behavioral sequence. The middle runs silently. No monitoring, no evaluation, no opportunity for conscious intervention. The prefrontal cortex, which was once running the show, goes quiet. Here is the part nobody tells you. Those encoded pathways in the striatum do not get erased. Behavioral change does not delete the old script. It requires building a competing pathway strong enough to outcompete the original during action selection, which means every time you are under stress, under cognitive load, or simply moving fast, the older, deeper program wins. Not because you lack discipline, because it has more synaptic weight. Call him Marcus, mid-30s, objectively capable, the kind of person who has read the books, done the reflection, can diagnose his own patterns in real time, and is still somehow exactly where he was 3 years ago. The sequel script. Marcus chose his career field at 22, not because it was the best fit, because it was the next logical step from what he had already studied. The script said the narrative needs continuity. What comes next must connect to what came before. 7 years later, Marcus knows the field is wrong for him. He also knows he has 7 years in it, and his brain, specifically the sunk cost processing in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, registers the idea of leaving as a loss, not as a correction. You have been in this exact calculation. Maybe about a job, maybe a relationship, maybe a city. The thought, I have come too far to walk away now. That thought is not a conclusion. It is the script announcing itself. The crowd pleaser script? Marcus is also exceptionally good at reading rooms. He knows what his manager wants to hear. He knows what his family needs him to be. He adjusts every time, automatically. Patricia Hewlin at McGill documented this as facades of conformity, the systematic suppression of personal values to mirror organizational or social expectations. Not occasional diplomacy, a full behavioral script that governs which opinions get expressed, which ambitions get voiced, and which version of the self shows up in which room. The cost is not just inauthenticity. The cost is that the crowd pleaser script colonizes decision-making. Marcus is not choosing his next move. He is calculating what the audience scores highest. Think about the last significant decision you made. How much of the calculation was, what do I actually want, versus how will this look and to whom? Most people, if they are honest, cannot cleanly separate the two. This one is the most insidious because it is culturally celebrated. The epic script says that a life worth living requires a grand, singular, externally legible narrative of purpose, a passion, a calling, a mission that can be stated in one sentence and validated by strangers online. Anything less registers as failure. Mentions of find your purpose in published books surged 700% in the past 2 decades. The self-help industry built a $50 billion annual market on the anxiety that gap creates. And here is the data point that should reframe everything. Survivorship bias is not just a cognitive error. It is the engine of that industry. We see the founders who bet everything on their passion and won. We do not see the statistically larger population who made the identical bet and lost. The algorithm does not show us the losses. The business model depends on not showing us the losses. Here is what the research says about changing a cognitive script. Awareness of the script is not the intervention. Keith Stanovich spent 20 years documenting what he called dysrationalia, the inability to think and behave rationally despite possessing adequate or superior intelligence. His finding was not that smart people lack awareness. His finding was that smart people are better at using their intelligence to defend existing scripts, not to dismantle them. Dan Kahan at Yale tested this directly. He gave participants a complex statistical problem. When the problem was framed neutrally, high numeracy individuals solved it accurately. When the identical problem was framed around a politically charged topic, high numeracy individuals performed worse than average, not because they could not do the math, but because they deployed their mathematical intelligence to find reasons the correct answer was wrong. The smarter you are, the more sophisticated your rationalization infrastructure. And Wolf at the University of Trier demonstrated that under acute stress, participants reverted to automated, scripted behavior even after the associated rewards had been fully devalued. The unstressed group adjusted immediately. Stress does not make you dumber. It forces the brain to disengage the expensive goal-directed system and run the pre-compiled script. Every high-pressure decision you have made in your life, the ones you later could not fully explain, was made from that exact state. Dan McAdams at Northwestern documented how people protect scripts through narrative identity. When a script fails to produce results, the brain does not conclude the script is wrong. It edits the story. The failure becomes a sacrifice, a necessary phase, a lesson that will make the eventual success more meaningful. The script continues. The story absorbs the evidence against it. What actually interrupts a script is not understanding it. It is building a competing behavioral pathway with enough repetition to outweigh the encoded one under the specific conditions where the original script fires. Peter Gollwitzer at New York University tested this across 94 independent studies. The intervention that worked was not increased motivation or deeper self-awareness. It was a single pre-specified plan. If situation X occurs, I will do Y. Not a goal, not a value. A specific stimulus response contract written in advance that outsources the decision to the environment before the script can fire. That is the structural gap between knowing and changing.
Shoots across the sea.
The self-help and personal development industry is currently worth $50 billion annually. It is projected to reach $80 billion within the decade. That number should be interrogated. Because if awareness reliably produced behavioral change, the market would shrink. People would buy the book, read the insight, change the behavior, and stop buying books. The market grows because the product does not fully work. And it does not fully work because it is selling the wrong intervention. The framework, identify your cognitive script, notice when you say should, replace it with might, is not wrong. It is incomplete in a specific way that the industry has financial incentive not to clarify. Identifying a script engages the prefrontal cortex. Breaking a script requires remodeling the basal ganglia. Those are two different biological processes operating on two different timescales, requiring two different types of intervention. We have all bought the book that explained everything perfectly and changed nothing. We understood it completely and walked back into the same pattern the following Tuesday. To our enormous credit, we bought a different book the following month. The coaching industry does not profit from permanent behavioral change. It profits from the aspiration gap, the persistent monetizable distance between who you are and who the epic script says you should be. The framework that says identify your script and choose differently is not a treatment. It is a product designed for an audience that wants the problem explained, not solved. The explanation feels like progress. The basal ganglia does not care about progress. It cares about repetition.
Out there, look for that circling square.
You are not stuck because you lack intelligence. You are not stuck because you lack awareness. You are stuck because the brain does not update scripts through insight. It updates them through repeated, pre-specified behavioral contracts executed under the exact conditions where the old script fires. That is the whole mechanism. Awareness tells you what is running. Structure determines what runs next. Stop saying you know better but cannot seem to change. Start saying you have the right diagnosis and the wrong intervention. There is one place this gets considerably worse before it gets better, and it is not another script. It is the tool most of you are using to think through your scripts right now, and the specific way it is designed to agree with everything you already believe. That is a different problem, and a different video.
Look